what stands out in my mind about David Matthews, other than being with his bellowing voice at the neighborhood boards, always there, always pushing the issue of the Aina, particularly Ka'ivi, was that he and I, even though in opposite parties, worked so closely together at the legislature, vis-a-vis the initiative, referendum, and recall, which he felt very, very strongly about. People should have a say over their community. At the city level, it's there, but at the state level, it's not. So I really miss Dave and all that he did, his commitment, and for what he has left as a legacy, which is now on a bench at Sandy Beach. How do they differentiate which bench is the David Matthews
allow
bench?
me, I'm
Please.
Delighted to announce that the bench has finally been replaced. We had problems with the bench and it was prematurely deteriorating. But it's all squared away, and this past week we had a brand new bench put in, and
super.
It's going to be up to par with all the other benches. But if I may, I want to comment on your statement about both of you being from different parties. It's always a pleasure to work with you because, you know, as Livable Hawaii Kaihui, we're nonpartisan, and we take particular pride in bringing all people to the table for the better good of community. And so I want to thank you ahead of time for you're doing that with us many times over and over again.
Thank you, Liz. When you do the right thing, it shouldn't make any difference which side of the party, which side of the aisle. But frankly, when you've got 90% on one side of the boat and 10% on the other, you don't have accountability. You have a little bit of a listing. And I'm on the other side of the boat, so sometimes it's a bit more difficult. So I appreciate those comments.
I wish you well with balance.
Yes, balance for accountability.
Important.
Because
accountability and balance.
Accountability
I completely
agree. In what you were doing. Yeah. Mardi, how about a couple of things about yourself and your background?
Well, my husband and I moved here in 1981, and I just feel so blessed to be able to be in Hawaii and on Oahu, and was able to raise my 3 children here, and I teach science, and so I think that interest helped to bring me to the Livable Hawaii Kaihui during this past year, and maybe back in 2006 or so, I was taking Ivan to the Oahu Club for tennis and swimming lessons and so forth, and that's when I noticed some very unusual looking chicks. They were, I hadn't really seen any like them before, and so began to try to find out what they were, and one thing led to another, and here we are working on improving the nesting habitat for this endangered bird that happens to be in a very unusual setting, in an urban setting. The most secretive wetland bird in all of Hawaii will walk right up to you and talk to you. They're quite tame at the club.
Ivan, what's the last thing the bird told you? Your mother just said they talked to you.
Yes. Well,
I'm holding you accountable for her statement.
They can't speak English, but they have been known to go on the tennis
Hawaiian,
court.
right?
Yes.
It's in Moorhead.
They have been known to go on the tennis court while you are playing tennis.
So the games have to stop.
They are so accustomed to people that they're not even scared of kids, really.
So it's an unusual chance to observe a wild animal very closely, and it's especially unique because they're endemic and critically endangered, and we want to do everything we can to increase their numbers. So we've learned that by making improvements even to a small wetland, it can be home to many water birds, and perhaps we can even consider making habitat for another endangered Hawaiian bird.
These are, Ivan, you wanted to add something there?
Yes, well, they are also only found on here in Kauai, nowhere else in the world, too.
Who is more, Kauai or Oahu?
Kauai does have more, but we are working on it.
Protecting it as it goes.
Protecting.
Yes.
But this is a rather recent discovery and protection effort, at least in Hawaii Kai, as we know it.
Actually, Livable Hawaii Kaihui had been working with Jim Dittmar, who's a member, for several years in trying to document the different wetland areas. You might have remembered last conversation with Jim was about Rim Island 2, a small man-made island in the middle of the marina that suddenly became a wetland habitat. So the beauty of this particular wetland project at the Oahu Club is that it inlines past efforts, and now we have this amazing cornerstone project to really give that whole wetland overall Honolulu region a showcase piece, if you will. So I wanted to mention something about Ivan is that we're really excited because he's our very first junior outreach coordinator, and he's actually officially on the wetland team. So the wetland team is Mardi, Ivan, Jim Ditmar, Todd Shelley, myself, and also Chris Kramer, who does a lot of, who's from Honolulu Fish Pond Heritage Center, who helps us with a lot of the background of the area, place
So
names.
Ivan is an outreach coordinator to the youth or to the community, or we should be hearing neighborhood board reports from
Yes, they're
Ivan?
doing a neighborhood board in 2 weeks, 2 months.
You know, as we speak about wetlands and a lot of the federal regulations, a lot of the local regulation, do you think it would ever have been possible for Henry Kaiser to build Hawaii Kai given present constraints, regulations, EPA, etc.?
I think
Would there ever be a Hawaii Kai? you
I
think?
believe that there would be a Hawaii Kai, and I think a combination, though, not just with current governing guidelines and laws, but also with perhaps where Kamehameha Schools is at this time. Back when Henry J. Kaiser was developing Hawaii Kai, Kamehameha Schools, obviously the largest landowner in Hawaii Kai, I don't think realized or was doing the appropriate inventories of what was there culturally. So I think today Hawaii Kai would pretty much be what we have today, but probably look a little different. We'd have greater pockets of cultural areas. Natural resource, I think, would have been done a little bit more with greater sensitivity to the situation where you don't take away to build back up, but you build around. And that's pretty much what I think
You're
would
not
happen
referring to the
today.
mountain behind the post office that people cut away so they could add a dozen or so houses on, which was kind of a sacrilege, something that I think not only we hear, but the community took offense at. That was just a blatant misuse of the environment.
And that actually stands today as a reminder of how it's important to be cognizant of repercussions. And I don't know a community member that doesn't get heated over that to this day.
You drive down
So-
Waikiki Drive
oh, yeah.
from Kalama Valley,
It's
and it's
sad.
right in your face.
It's a scar on the mountain.
It'll never have ivy growing over it unless
Yeah.
somebody,
Quite
well, I doubt
unfortunate.
it'll ever happen.
It also encroached upon the ag lands. It was true urban encroachment because they rezoned a section of the ag lands in order to be able to do that subdivision.
I asked earlier about one of your heroes, and you, as I mentioned, Dave Matthews. Another name that comes to mind, George Santos. Does that ever ring a bell? And you want to talk us about George Santos and Elizabeth Reilly?
Oh dear, I've never had the privilege of meeting George Santos, but back when we were first initially thinking about how do you put your arms around the fight of Kamilanui Valley and stop development, how do you raise awareness throughout the community, how do you speak to Kamehameha Schools, and at the time that developer. The research that we did brought us to Kalama Valley, and we were able to draw a lot of inspiration from those deeply sad stories of how the process of how that area was developed. Kalama Valley is home to a lot of good people today, but the fault, in my opinion, is in the process of how it occurred. George Santos, in particular, was the last man standing, the last man on his roof. The story is that a year after he was finally removed from the property, he passed away. But he was a fighter and unified, in my opinion, the Hawaiian movement of activism, coming together of people, and not just Hawaiian people at that. I think if I would have lived here back then, I probably would have been out there and I would have known George.
Standing on the roof, defying those tractors coming to bulldoze your house down. I was here and I had never met him, but I know that many people don't realize Hawaii was the beginning of the Hawaiian Renaissance, the Hawaiian movement, some say the Hawaiian Revolution, versus those who think, oh, Hawaii's got nothing to do with Hawaiiana or Hawaiian. And there's the thing about, the heiau and the whole fish ponds and the whole issue and the traditions that are very, very deeply felt there. My office has put out an SOS, or a information guideline on where was George Santos's house. So we not only say about what the history of George Santos in Kalama Valley, but specifically where it was. I have a lead that is so hot I can't even mention it because I don't want to mention the name of the house, that there's somebody who lives there now, but it's almost pinpointed now, and I'll tell you, between the highway and Mokuhanu, which I think was probably your guess anyway.